This week on Full Circle Florida, time could be up for TikTok.
You are voting against my small business. You are voting against me getting a slice of my American pie.
The social media app is now closer to a possible U.S. ban, the motive in Washington, and the next step. And on the record on the border, we're pretty much locked in for a Trump-Biden round 2 in November. The possible solutions each may use to stem the record number of people who are entering the U.S. illegally. And lottery dreams on hold, the reason Florida is getting between hundreds of people and their lottery prizes, and the silence when we try to get your questions answered. Welcome to Full Circle Florida. I'm Lauren St. Germain in for Paul this week. The stage is officially set for a presidential election rematch. This week, President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump secured enough delegates to clinch their party's nomination. Immigration will be a big issue over the next 8 months. The U.S. Border Patrol encountered nearly 2.5 million migrants in fiscal year 2023 alone, and that's a record. So what are the solutions? Our Scripps News Deputy Political Director Joe St. George has a look at where Biden and Trump differ when it comes to policy.
Well, the prospects of a major border security deal passing in Washington and becoming law this year continues to look unlikely after many conservatives nationwide, including former President Trump, criticized a bipartisan package negotiated in the Senate earlier this year. So where does the country go from here? The reality is this November's election will impact every facet of American life, and that includes the southern border. In 2024, the border matters. But unlike past border issues, this election year is not about redefining boundaries. It's about who's allowed in, who is kept out, and what about the people who are already here? Gallup asked Americans in February, what do you think is the most important problem facing the country today? 28% said immigration. It was number one. Unlike past elections where candidates may have limited records on the issue, this year, the differences between the leading candidates are well documented.
I will not demonize immigrants saying they are poison in the blood of our country.
They want open borders, and open borders are going to destroy our country.
Border question number one, what to do with people seeking asylum at the southern border. Remember, federal law permits asylum to people facing persecution. What happens before or after is where the policy comes in. Former President Trump enacted a Remain in Mexico policy while in office, which instructed thousands of asylum-seeking migrants at the southern border to wait in Mexico while they await immigration hearings. President Joe Biden canceled Remain in Mexico and has called it inhumane in the past. Human Rights First reports that when the policy was in place, there was at least 1,544 publicly reported cases of kidnapping, murder, torture, and rape, and other violent attacks against people returned to Mexico. Border question number two, how to prevent migrants from seeking asylum at the southern border in the first place. President Biden has encouraged the use of a mobile app to help make the asylum-seeking process more orderly. He instructed Vice President Kamala Harris to work with private companies to improve economic conditions in Central America. Former President Trump, when he was in office, worked to restrict asylum seekers from wanting to come here too. He issued travel bans and raised the threshold for what conditions would qualify for asylum, and then enacted a zero-tolerance policy for those who attempted to enter the U.S. illegally. An Inspector General report from 2021 found that that policy resulted in over 3,000 children being separated from their parents. Finally, border question number three, how to improve physical security along the southern border and what to do with the migrants already here. Former President Trump built over 450 miles of the border wall when he was in office, and he wants to build more. President Biden has been largely critical of that, pushing for billions of dollars worth of border investments instead. Former President Trump wants the largest deportation task force ever assembled if he's elected. Meanwhile, the Biden administration deported 142,000 last year and has spoke of the need to find a pathway to citizenship for some in the past. Joe St. George, Scripps News, Washington.
So I want to bring in our political analyst now, Dr. Susan McManus, so we can break down this topic further. So, Dr. McManus, first let's talk about how immigration policies and the border will impact the election coming up in November.
It is consistently one of the top 2 or 3 issues that people mention that's on their concern list, and something they're going to be watching how the candidates approach. As we speak, the polling for quite some time now has shown that it's a real problem for Biden. It's more of an asset for Trump. So the border has become very important to both sides.
So what's the strategy for each side here to really get the voters on their side?
On the Democratic side, what you see is in the president's budget that he's just proposed, there's money to go to a lot of these big cities where there's a lot of migrants and there's no housing and no work. So it's kind of going directly to areas where, blue areas where there's been a lot of people moved in, and it's made a lot of Democrats in the area angry. So by proposing to put a lot of money to fix the problem, that's one of the Democrat strategy. The Republican strategy is to calculate how much it's costing each family or each individual for the whole border issue. And the most recent account, it showed over $1,000 a person they've lost or, been charged in a way for the immigrants, and for families it's over $2,000. So they're stressing the economic side of it.
Do you think each of their strategies are resonating with the sides, or are people still kind of up in the air?
It's an issue that you don't have to push Republicans on much. The real challenge is more with the Democrats, and we're waiting to see on it. Another thing that Biden has done is to put some ads out suggesting and actually affirming that when they had a chance for a bipartisan bill that was going through Congress, the Republican House did not go along with it. Now, how far that goes, I am not as convinced as I am about the utility and the effectiveness of putting money into the cities, blue cities, where there's lots of migrants, and the budgets of those places have been devastated.
And in comparison to recent years, recent elections, how has immigration moved on the important stance for voters?
We have never seen it at this level. It is number one consistently. It sort of changes place, number one or number two. It kind of changes places with the economy, depending on what's going on, the price of gas and groceries at a moment a poll is taken. But it's never, never beyond the top two.
So an issue that we're really going to be watching very closely coming up in November.
Absolutely, yes.
All right, Dr. McManus, thank you so much. Still to come here on Full Circle Florida, TikTok could be running out of time in the U.S. The next step to force the app's China-based owner to sell. That's next on Full Circle Florida.